Hello there, YouTube. Joel from Jonesy's. Welcome back to the channel. This is going to be part 5 of the Land Rover Defender 90 LS swap. We've got lots and lots of progress to go over, so let's get right down to it. So we left off part 4 on this build with basically some chassis assembly. We got the 6.2 liter LS set in the chassis, and we went over all those details, and we were just on the beginning stages of body and paint as well as rust repair. So let's take a look back at some of the photos, and you can see how we got to this point. So the floor pans were very rusty on our Rover, so we ended up cutting those out. And luckily, there's a lot of aftermarket support, and Rovers North supplied us with these really nice stainless steel floor pans. So after we got those fit and welded in, we stripped the firewall and prepped the exterior and the inside of the bed for paint. So here you can see we just DA sanded and scuffed everything up, wire wheeled the underside the best we could to get it as clean, and then seal it all up with epoxy primer. Things were starting to really look pretty good at this point because we were turning the corner on the dirty work. And so we got the body tub sprayed with the color matched texture Raptor liner. After that, we masked all that off and switched our focus to the exterior, stripping as much of that paint and getting that as prepped and as cleaned as we could. Some holes we had to fill, top of the firewall. We ran into a little challenge on the fenders. They were really tin canny, so we cut a piece of steel on the CNC plasma and panel bonding adhesive them to the back side, the underside of those fenders, holding them down to stiffen those up so they won't be oil canny. We sealed the outside with epoxy primer again. We left all of the rivet holes and spot welds, just because there's no good way to prep that. And then we coated it all in base coat, clear coat. Turned out really nice. I was really happy. Then we shifted our focus to restoring some of the firewall components, put in a new blower motor for the heater, freshened up the brake booster and master cylinder, as well as the clutch slave cylinder. Then after that, we bolted that stuff back onto the firewall and got ready to set the body back onto the chassis. Carefully setting it on the chassis because there's not a lot of clearance in the back with those mounting tabs. So after we got the body and paint all dialed in and done, we went ahead and started to put the soft top on, as well as install the roll cage. Here you can kind of see the color matched textured liner that we used throughout the inside of the Rover. We are currently right in a deep process of getting wiring taken care of, so we're upgrading all of the exterior lighting to LEDs. There you can see the stop and tail, and then there will be the turn, and then this one right here is for the backup lights. So we're deep into wiring as well as body assembly at this point. We do have the doors hung, and they are mostly put together. We are missing some linkages for some of the lock mechanisms, so that's why these doors are not totally complete, but we'll get there. Here is all of the rust repair finished. So that all turned out awesome, and this color matched spray texture looks really good. Now here you can see we're struggling with making all of the Rover switches work correctly with the later model harness. Rover switches are not really all that great of quality, especially the aftermarket ones, the replacement ones, but we're getting there. Also, engine wiring harness is coming together. We had to still have some sensors and stuff that need to be extended, like for the mass airflow sensor, that's just kind of temporarily put in there. But we did secure and fabricate our air intake. You can see it's just got a little mounting bracket right there. Tied it together. That all looks super nice and clean. We've got really good clearance at the heater box. Plumbed in the heater hoses, got some molded 90s. This heater hose right here is actually a 3/4 to 5/8 conversion hose with the molded 90s. So that again is super clean.
we just temporarily have the radiator kind of set in place and mocked up with hoses so that maybe at the end of this video, we can start this thing up. No guarantees, but we're gonna give it a shot. This hose is set up along with this vent tube so that we can actually fill the engine block and fill everything from this upper radiator hose and have all the air bleed out through that bleeder. That's kind of a trick for LS swaps. You need to really do a good job of bleeding out all of the air out of the engine blocks so that they don't have any air pockets and overheat. A couple items that we are struggling with a little bit is, you probably can't tell on the camera, but belt alignment on the power steering. This bracket doesn't seem to want to line up specifically, and I don't want to pull the pulley out any further on that shaft for fear that it will potentially come off. So we're in process working through those details. Power steering lines are done. This is the factory Escalade. This engine came out of a 2012 Escalade. This metal pre-bent line that goes into the back of the pump is the factory, and then our regular hydraulic shop was able to get a compression fitting to go on here. And then that just loops down to a couple of port adapters that go into regular JIC fittings. So that turned out pretty good, nice and clean. A couple other items that we need to figure out on this side before the fender can go back on. Obviously, we're in the middle of wiring, so that stuff is kind of just temporary, and that'll all get secured and wrapped. But this right here is the hydraulic clutch that goes to the GM clutch. And this right here is the Rover feed for the hydraulic clutch from the clutch master cylinder. And so we have a standard braided line as well as a bulkhead, but these two fittings are not compatible. This is just a regular JIC-AN, and this I think is some kind of a SAE fitting. So we'll have to make a custom bulkhead fitting to get that tied in, but that shouldn't be too terrible of a job. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this engine filled up. We'll double check and triple check all of our fluids, and let's see if it will run in the Rover chassis. So right now I'm just filling this from the upper radiator hose, and I'm using distilled water, and I'm using straight water. I'm not ready to mix in the antifreeze until I've run it, make sure everything is good to go. And I'm keeping track of the number of gallons I'm putting in so that when I drain this out, I can add the appropriate amount of antifreeze. And again, you want to use distilled water if at all possible for this. And as I'm pouring, I can feel air coming out of this breather. And you're just going to want to fill it up. Oh, and now I've got water coming out of the steam hole as well. So everything at this point is full and ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and hopefully, without spilling too much water, we'll go ahead and connect up the upper radiator hose. And we'll plug in the steam vent. We'll hook up some battery, double check that everything will be clear, and we'll see if we can make this thing run. Now, looking ahead, this is going to be the second to last video in this series. The next video, obviously, we're going to have all of the fenders on, everything's going to be good, and it should be ready to test drive. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so you can get notified when we update. Well, we're almost ready to start this thing up. I verified that we have oil in the dipstick over there. We've got distilled water in the cooling system, and it's been bled out through that vent tube. And a couple other items that we have going for us is I have a battery charger hooked up on the battery. I also have a scan tool. This is just the Zurich Harbor Freight version. I've had extremely good results with this scan tool, and honestly, for the price, it's about as good as you're going to get. So I've got the scan tool OBD2 connector in there, and we will turn the key on and verify that the fuel pump runs and shuts off. Make sure that all of that is wired correctly. And then before we do anything else, we're going to go ahead and scan it and see if there's any immediate codes right off the bat before we start to crank. So let's go ahead and turn the key on and listen for some relays to click and the fuel pump to run. I'm not sure if you guys were able to pick up on that, but heard the relays from our fuse block as well as the fuel pump relay turn on, which is a good sign. The fuel pump ran and then shut off. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and scan. And what I'm gonna do here, and I won't bore you guys with all the details, is I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna pull up the ECM data stream, and it will show me that the computer is able to see the mass airflow sensor, the crank sensor, the throttle pedal, and you'll be able to get some data from that. It'll tell me oil pressure, it'll tell me water temp, and all that is information that we're gonna want to be watching when we get this engine started up, so that it will tell us if we have any issues. I've used HP tuners to go through and take out the anti-theft and everything else on this, as well as swap it, because this vehicle is the LS with the NV4500 transmission. As you guys know, the donor vehicle that we got it out of was a Cadillac Escalade, and it was a 6L80. So different transmissions. So we have done a lot of calibration on this ECM, and it hasn't been run since. So let's see if there's any fault codes. So yeah, so we've got some cooling fan relay stuff, but you know what? We're not too concerned about that because we have a mechanical fan. So we're not too concerned about those. So we'll go ahead and clear those, even though they won't prevent it from running. What we're looking for here is we're looking for anything that's gonna actually like stop it from running. And we want to read the data stream. And so it's gonna ask you what you want, and we want engine data. So then this is all of the different items that you can select to pay attention to after it runs. Okay, so we've gone through here and we have selected all the things that I want it to display. Looks like we're getting some glare off of some lights up there. And we're going to go ahead and display those. And so here is all of the data that we are going to have for our read back. We've got air intake temperature, intake manifold, whether it's open loop, closed loop, mass airflow sensor, the desired idle, what the RPMs are, as well as the oil pressure. I didn't see coolant temp, so I'm going to go ahead and see. Okay, I added back in the engine coolant temp sensor. So these are the ones that we're really mostly paying attention to. Obviously the coolant temp sensor as well as the oil pressure. This value right here will tell me if the actual like electronic throttle pedal is working. So I think what we're gonna do next, since we know the fuel pump runs and we know that relays are clicking and we don't have any codes, I'm gonna go ahead and crank and try and start this thing up. So fingers crossed. The very first startup on this engine in the Defender 90. Wish me luck. Yes. That is a thumbs up. All All right, guys, well, that's great news. It runs. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a temporary air cleaner on it so that we don't accidentally inhale something we're not supposed to. So we'll put that guy on there, and then we're going to start it up and actually run it a little bit longer this time and see if everything kind of stabilizes and if the idle starts to come around, because that's most likely what's going to happen is that initial startup, everything is fresh, everything is new, you still got air in all the lines. And so now that it's run just a little bit, we're going to double check the engine oil, check all the fluids, and then start it up and see if it kind of stabilizes, and then we'll monitor the scanner. So I topped off the oil, I added the air cleaner on that side, and it really seems like it's actually coming around. I'll grab the camera here and give you guys a listen to the exhaust. Really nice mellow rumble. Really idling nice, starting to really come together and sound smooth. Okay guys, here is the scan tool data. Everything so far is looking really, really good. We've got our desired idle at 624. It's almost up to operating temperature, 192. It's got a 195 degree thermostat in it. Oil pressure looks great, 47 PSI. It's been running in this mode for about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Our actual idle speed fluctuates right around 700, so that still looks really good. Our oxygen sensors are doing what they're supposed to do. You can see they're cycling from rich to lean, which is exactly correct. Manifold pressure looks really good. I'll have to look up what the specs need to be for the long-term fuel trim, but I'm assuming that's going to be okay. And what is really good and why everything is starting to sound and run a little bit better is that we are actually in closed loop. One unfortunate thing right here is that the malfunction indicator lamp has been requested. That means that the check engine light is on. So we're gonna go back and see what that is. But the engine, if you guys, hopefully you guys can hear it over me talking, it is sounding really, really good. Okay, so it's saying that the fuel trim is too lean on bank 2. And it is also lean on bank 1. So that would explain why that fuel trim number was up where it kind of set off an alarm on me that it didn't look normal. So it says it's running lean on bank 1 and bank 2. I'm not too concerned about it right now. Just because everything is completely fresh and it's still trying to, like I said, get air out of the system and kind of sort itself out. I mean, we've had all of a grand total of probably 5 minutes of running here, so it really hasn't had time to go through its paces yet. 192 degrees. So I think that's pretty good. I think we're gonna shut it off and we'll wrap this video up. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap up this video. Super duper excited that our Rover project runs. That's always a major milestone on any of these big builds because there's so many variables. We have an engine that's out of a 2000 Escalade. We have a Land Rover. We have aftermarket wiring harnesses. We have custom tuning. There's a lot of things that can go wrong on these installs, and you never really know how it's going to work until you get through that first startup. So we got through our startup. I'm super happy. We do have some troubleshooting to do on maybe how the engine's running, but all of that stuff is not critical at this point. The engine runs, it starts, it goes into closed loop, and I think a lot of that stuff is going to sort itself out down the road as we get some more runtime on the engine. So if you guys like these videos, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I hopefully will see you in the next video.